today on this lovely Earth Day, as we were discussing that the Earth is getting a much deserved break from all of our activity over the last 5 weeks. So maybe we can go out, at least here in Cincinnati, it's absolutely gorgeous. So to be able to go out and have a fun day out there.
Yes, for sure.
Welcome to episode 2 of the HR Chat series. Today we are joined by Licia Thompson. And to remind everyone why we started our HR Chat series. So this was something that my partner with Becky Falvey and Chris Burkhart were on with me today, really kind of talking about the other front line. And as we were talking, all of us kind of worked in the HR space. And as we got to talking, how can we support the HR community who's going through a lot right now too, in terms of, we certainly don't want to discount what our healthcare workers are doing for us to keeping us all safe and healthy and putting their lives at risk, but really translating that to the HR space of those who are doing a lot in terms of carrying a lot of the weight that comes with the situation right now that may include layoffs or furloughs or salary reductions. And then as Licia will talk about on today's episode, what does it really look like for people to come back to work in this new normal, and really trying to make sense of return to work policies, but being able to do it from a very human standpoint and not just let's follow the letter of the law, but how do we meet each individual where they are and bring them back to work in the safest manner, but also keeping everyone else safe. So we have all said that we would start each session with a funny share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And for anyone who has been watching Some Good News with John Krasinski, I took today's from his most recent episode. So just 1 second. Here we go. So hopefully you guys got to see that. But one, John Krasinski is one of my favorite actors on the planet. I've rewatched The Office since we've been quarantined. And you can never go wrong with the Avengers. So I just wanted to share that little clip to bring a smile to everyone's face and to share in all the great things that are going on across not only the country, but the world as well. So with that, we'll get started with Licia. So Licia Thompson spent 20 years at Macy's. So she's been in the HR space for a good portion of her career. And she worked on the compliance side of the world. So things like workers' comp, return to work, and managed care. And actually our paths crossed. So while we both live in Cincinnati, our paths crossed in Chicago when we met one another during our coaching certification. So for the last 12 months, Licia has been working diligently and was awarded her professional coaching certification. And her zone of genius, as we call it, is holistic life and leadership. And she's really focused on optimizing clients' mindsets and outlooks to be able to achieve the results that they want. And actually what's been great about both of her worlds coming together is that over these last few weeks, she's been really focused on how to bring kind of that compliance and managed care back into the workforce and how to do it, as we talked about, from a human point of view, and really bringing compassion and empathy to that process so that as workers come back, one, they feel a little bit safer doing so, and from an HR standpoint of really being able to manage that process in order to do that. So Becky, you said that you weren't able to hear. Can you hear?
I can now. I couldn't hear the video, but I saw it, so it's all good. It's all good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so Licia, so tell us a little bit more about your coaching practice and how you're approaching the market in your zone of genius these days.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate that. I appreciate you as well, Lauren, for this opportunity to speak to your audience or speak with your audience. So actually, twofold, I think. I would say that, let me just start with where I transitioned from to where I am now. And so at Macy's, actually was there 23 years, but I built the Return to Work program in 2009. And at that time, and I also was the director of the managed care program and the Return to Work program within the risk management department. So the Return to Work process is owned by various groups depending upon the organization and how, it's set up. So in Macy's corporate situation, it was risk management. And so I deployed a team back in 2009, and we set about training all the HR partners across the nation. And then, of course, that program had to evolve as we move forward, right? Because there are so many changes in the laws. And by being in risk management, not only were our partners HR professionals, but also workers' comp professionals as well. And partnerships with the leave of absence would be the key partners, along with, of course, the employees who need to come back with accommodations in place. So that was my initial foray. And then after, so I left in September, and then I took a position with Amazon in their corporate space on the non-occupational health side. And that was as a consultant in the accommodations world as well. So I say all that to say that moving forward, my reason for leaving Macy's at the time was twofold. A lot was changing in the retail industry, obviously, but then as you alluded to, we met in Chicago back in March of 2019 in our coach training program. And so because of that journey, I wanted to take prior work experience and then align it with the new skills that were learned, that we spent a year learning. So to incorporate all of that, my business is twofold. So I am a holistic leadership coach, certified also as an ELI master practitioner, which means Energy Leadership Index master practitioner, meaning that my emphasis is working with individuals, tapping into their core beliefs, and then helping to motivate and energize men and women to utilize their skills to move forward in life and to live at their maximum potential really is my goal. And to do that, I incorporate my methodology, which is to dig deep and grow, elevating mindset, energy, and performance through a mind-body-soul connection, which leads back to the whole emphasis on utilizing an individual's core energy. So tapping into values, how you want to show up, what position do you take when adversity presents itself? Are you comfortable standing with confidence in your beliefs and tapping into your values? And so I believe that we all have values. I think sometimes life gets in the way, and sometimes we don't necessarily pause to think about what those values are, and then are we feeling 100% confident and comfortable in doing that? So I'm hoping to empower men and women as we journey together, that me working with my clients will be able to help them to feel extremely confident and comfortable. And then the second part of my business initiative is as a consultant. So I also work with companies. Not always is it within HR, as I stated previously. It would depend on who actually owns that return to work process. However, we know at the end of the day, any issue or any matters that maybe become challenged will always land up in HR ultimately. So definitely partnering with HR, which is why I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to chat with you all and your audience today. And I hope that there are questions so that we can have an engaging dialogue. So please, everyone, drop your comments in the chat box, and Lauren and I both will be on the lookout for those comments and or questions. But in working with corporations, my vision is to partner with HR leaders because I want to emphasize that everything going on that's been going on through the COVID pandemic just adds to the vast and complicated responsibilities of HR professionals. I know that that position can be stressful anyway, but now we're adding on top of all the other factors that have always existed, but now we're adding on top of that this population of people who will be coming back to work in need of accommodations through the ADA guidelines. So when you add that percentage of people, and I'm speaking of those who had accommodation needs prior to COVID-19, as well as those who then got, maybe had a diagnosis involving coronavirus, and now are coming back with limitations resulting from the diagnosis. So it enhances the vast population of employees who are in need of assistance. And so that's really the mission that I'm on right now. I am super passionate about working with employees who need accommodations in the workplace. It's a super complicated process, as you probably already know. But what that looks like typically is that the injured employee or ill, not just necessarily injured, and then I'm speaking from an occupational health side more so right now, and aligning that with the work comp space because of the amount of people who will receive notes from their medical providers to be accommodated. It could be a physical accommodation and or a psychological accommodation. Although in the work comp space, the psychological component isn't typically associated as much with the restrictions on the workers' comp side, as you would see that more so on the non-occupational health side, which right now is going to probably increase because of all the anxiety that the COVID situation definitely is causing to rise up in people, which is understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the ADA and the accommodation world, as you already talked about, is extremely complicated to start with, and then add on top of this one complicated situation in and of itself, but also something that no one's ever been through. And so kind of what we've talked about before is we're writing the playbook as it's happening.
Yes.
So Licia, when you think about all of this stuff, what's your point of view regarding HR's involvement as potentially injured or ill employees come back to work, and what that looks like post-COVID based on anything that may have happened pre-COVID-19?
Right. So just to make it, I guess, give a visual of the breadth of the complication, how vast it is. There are many situations where employees have temporary restrictions, but may also have permanent restrictions that are different from the temporary simultaneously. So that could mean that these are coming from the COVID, from the diagnosis of coronavirus, but it could be also in addition to pre-existing conditions that are still going forward. So when I say pre-existing, I'm not speaking of a diagnosis of, with respect to the COVID, because this can be added to, or we're also talking about the population of people that weren't impacted at all by coronavirus, but may have also had temporary and permanent restrictions, or one or the other. So it's just extremely complicated. It's very time consuming to sort through all of that. And then you have the employees who may have had more than one injury during the course and scope of their employment for an individual employer. But if those dates are still active with respect to the need for accommodations, that requires then that the person handling the return to work process is looking at all of that for when considering how to create the accommodation. So what my concern is that because it is complicated, because right now we're in a mode of having opportunity to take a look at existing policies and processes, I really want to encourage people to, employers to take a look at those policies that were in place prior to COVID-19. Mm-hmm. In many cases, if we're all honest, I think we would agree that those policies and processes need to be reviewed annually, if not biannually. There is always room for opportunity, even when we think we've got the perfect program, because the laws change across the nation in the work comp sector. It depends upon what state you live in as to how that benefit is calculated for the biweekly lost time payments. And so you're factoring that in with ever evolving leave of absence guidelines that also change. And so my message really, or my plea, is that employers take some time right now to revisit all of that, to look at ways to streamline the processes. Mm-hmm. And where I believe that typically what I've seen is an area to work on for improvement is to tighten the gap that exists between the date that the physician says the employee can return to work with accommodations in place. Typically, those notes come a little after they were actually issued. And that's because the employee will submit them directly to their supervisor or to someone in HR, or it's submitted directly from the physician's office. So we've already lost time right there, some days, depending on how quickly that process takes. Now, if you're bringing someone back from a leave of absence, that then requires the return to work person to also coordinate with the leave team. And so depending on workloads and staffing, so forth, there sometimes is a lag time there as well. Meanwhile, if someone's sitting out on a leave waiting to come back with an accommodation, the company is losing money per day that gap exists. And so that's what I would encourage people, really, employers right now, just to look at that and then figure out ways to streamline the process more now than ever before, because we just can't afford to lose days when everyone is needing to come back to work, people who've been furloughed, laid off, what have you. So there is going to be a huge increase in the number of employees coming back. We're not just talking about the ones who were furloughed but are in perfect health. And I just don't want the population of those who need the ADA accommodations to be overlooked or forgotten because of the vast numbers of other employees also needing to come back to work. So in doing that, just a few things, in addition to streamlining and tightening up that gap, I am also on a mission to encourage employers to look at integrating the systems. And so a lot of companies will say, yes, we have an integrated leave disability process. And really, at the end of the day, that's not 100% accurate to say that. So what I mean by integrated is working in the same system. So that's been a challenge and had been a while. Even when I was at Macy's, it's a challenge because that takes money, of course, to enhance systems. But trust me, it is worth it, I believe, to get all the players in the same system. Then you're not calling someone in leave of absence, and you're not emailing, you're not IMing, and that takes time as well. And so if we're all working in the same system, that means the return to work person can see what's going on the leave of absence side and vice versa. And that makes the process much quicker to navigate, because we really, at the end of the day, we're here to help this injured worker come back with accommodations in place in a timely manner, which is dictated by the guidelines from the EEOC and from ADA guidelines. That process, called the interactive dialogue, needs to be timely, which means fast as possible.
Absolutely. And Alicia, thank you for all this. I'm taking diligent notes as you're talking. Thinking about bringing together kind of your coaching background and your compliance expertise, What recommendations do you have for looking at it from an HR point of view in terms of, one, how to almost alleviate some of the mindset pressure that comes with this process from the HR side in terms of getting people back to work quickly, understanding their accommodations, partnering with their managers in order to understand how this is really going to work on, the quote unquote shop floor, whatever your shop floor is.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for HR to help, get them in the right mindset so that they can kind of approach this without feeling overwhelmed based on the volume that may be coming to them?
Right. So good question. First and foremost, my belief is that the leadership, the mandate to review these processes and to always look for additional opportunities to enhance what is already possibly good, but there's, we know, always room for improvement. I believe that that message needs to come from the top level. My experience has shown that although even in my role as a director, yes, I have a lot of direct reports and I'm partnering with HR typically at that point only when a matter is complicated or has gone wrong, right? So that wouldn't come to me because I'm not the first line. However, that the best or the ideal situation is when the senior most leader of the organization says that this is what has to happen. Then that's when people realize that they have to carve out time to have those conversations and to do that timely because they're being held accountable. It's on their performance review. It's a part of their expectations. Ideally, it is part of the essential functions of their jobs as well. And I believe that when that occurs across organizations, we'll see the process move through in a more powerful, timely manner. And I think that the communication really needs to be with clarity as well. Part of my goals as a coach is that I'm empowering individuals to learn to speak and think with clarity and also purpose, right? And confidence. And so I would utilize the exact same skill set in a work environment, asking lots of questions when needed, when talking to the employees that you're trying to bring back to work, speak with them in a manner of, seeking clarity from them, and then to also make sure that they're understanding and that they're clear about what it is that the return to work person is asking of them. Because that's where the process breaks down many times, just because in that rush of having so many employees that the outreach is needed to go to, sometimes the return to work person or the HR, whomever it is that delivers that message, is also stressed because of workload. So while they think that they are being clear, sometimes, and they are, but if you're the person who's still dealing with some pain or some emotion around the injury and coming back to work and not maybe having gotten paid on a normal basis the way that they needed to be, if they were working, they are accustomed to receiving, every so many weeks, they know the date that they're getting paid. Well, all of that has changed. So a lot of times it's hard for that employee to hear everything that you're talking about in that moment. Yeah. So it's important to be clear. Who are the contact people? When they have questions, who do they reach out to? Because they are actually working with several different groups, right? If they're on a leave, they're dealing with someone in LOA. If it's a work comp injury, they're dealing with the claims examiner. They may also be dealing with a return to work person. They may also be dealing with their HR person. So my message is right now, before this whole process really escalates, I would encourage employers to reach out and bring those groups, the leaders from those various groups together to brainstorm on how to consolidate those touch points and those processes.
Licia, you bring up a lot of great points. A lot of your experience has been with Macy's, right? Obviously a big company. What recommendations do you have for any smaller companies who potentially don't necessarily have leave of absence, return to work, right? The groups aren't necessarily disparate, but they may be one person or, a very small group of people really dealing in that space. What could that look like?
So in those situations, Ideally, it may be advantageous, depending upon the size of the company, to look at the fully integrated model. And what I mean by that is some companies, I know American Energy Power, based in Northern Ohio, has done this for many years, but that has been their model. So what I mean by that is one person is managing the leave of absence piece and also the return to work piece for their employees. Now, it's easier to do if the organization is smaller, because then the number of open cases obviously isn't as vast as with a larger organization, but that would involve cross-training. And then when bringing in new employees or those who are promoted or cross-trained into a different group, that would be a recommendation that I would support or encourage, is that people are cross-trained and understand leave of absence guidelines, and also that they understand the return to work process and how that looks and what needs to happen around compliance with ADA guidelines. So yes, that's complicated. I don't know if employers have considered doing that. It would involve specializing in a broader manner, but at the end of the day, it makes the transition much smoother for not only the employer, but also for the employee who is in need of that assistance, because you're not being passed around to so many different people. And what I didn't mention is many employers have a third-party administrator handling the leave of absence and or the claims process. So when you add that to everything else, there's a partnership that needs to occur with the TPA as well.
Excellent, thank you. We have a hand up from Judith. Judith, I will unmute you. Judith, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent. So you had your hand up. What would you like to ask or comment on?
Well, this seems to be a problem with Zoom. Initially, I couldn't hear the two of you, but I would like to really, really tell you how proud I am of my two girls from Cincinnati, since I'm from Cincinnati. And I have to make a disclaimer. I'm Alicia's cousin.
Tell them what your career path is. I'm sure that's why you're speaking now, because you have some insight.
Well, I do. And I was just thinking that there are going to be some claims. People are working from home. So if I trip over my throw rug, I'm going to file a claim. And also, if I have a diagnosis of anxiety, I'm going to say that working from home with my 5 kids screaming and whatever has increased my anxiety. There are going to be all kinds of novel claims coming in as a result of people working from home, because many of the office buildings in Manhattan and the whole New York City area are locked down, and only essential workers are allowed into the building. So most of the people are working from home. And if we need to conduct hearings, we're doing it by Zoom, which is good because I could actually see face-to-face this claimant sitting in Florida who's making a claim. And also, we're finding more people are willing to settle claims now because everybody needs money now. So you as the employer really have the upper hand. I don't know very much about the HR side of it, but I would imagine we may also see more claims from HR personnel because you're going to be deluged with questions and trying to solve employees' problems that maybe have never come up before. But that's about it. But I find the problem with Zoom is it takes it a while for you to see everybody or to actually hear. And I don't know if that's been, Licia knows from Easter what a problem we had trying to get everybody connected.
Yeah, so it just takes a few tries at it to just figure out how to navigate through. But let me add that Judith is speaking because she is a workers' comp attorney. She's an attorney, a former judge in New York City. So Her knowledge in the work comp industry has gone on for decades, making her an expert in that area. So I'm really thankful that you joined our call.
Well, thank you so much, Judith. And, from what I understand, Zoom has had some troubles today, specifically. So it could just be something that's going on with their server, but we do appreciate that feedback. So I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. We're just about at 12. So one of the things that we talked about was always having a mindset moment. So ending each of our sessions with something that allows participants to potentially see something from a different point of view, or potentially take something as a ray of hope in order to apply to their lives, whether it be personal or professional. So Alicia has agreed to provide us a mindset moment. So by all means, please go ahead.
So just a very quick one. These times are very stressful, and we are all probably living with some anxiety, even those of us who previously may not have. And so I just want to encourage everyone to remember self-care is super important right now. And so as we begin to navigate back into workplaces, I think there are 4 states that are going back on Friday, and then others go back on Monday. And those are some southern states, and we'll see that continue. But take some moments to walk away from the laptop, walk away. If you can, go outside, get a breath of fresh air, take deep breaths. Maybe hold the breath and count to 5 before exhaling. Close your eyes when you're doing that. And just that breathing pattern tends to release some calm endorphins that would be helpful just for a quick pause. Lauren, you and I talk about working out often. And so I know that not everyone is the person who is going to work out, but just take a walk, do whatever it takes just to calm down, get your blood moving, get your heart rate elevated, and you'll find that that is super helpful. And then also one quick thing, I know our time is just about up, but I wanted to just leave a couple of quotes too as a part of just mindfulness. Absolutely. And so I'm just going to read them so that I don't misquote, but I thought this is appropriate based on kind of where we are right now. And the quote is, "Some people feel as though they're stripped of choice when change occurs, so it's natural to resist at first. It's helpful to remember that although no one can completely predict or control the change, everyone has a choice about how they feel about it." And that quote is from Bruce Schneider, who you'll know, Lauren, who actually is the founder of the IPEC Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, from which Lauren and I are both certified. But another quote, just really quickly, is, "Do the best that you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." And that's from Maya Angelou. So thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm available for any future questions. I can be reached at Licia, Licia, at LiciaThompson.com. And my work phone number is 513-445-8363. And
Licia, what's your website? And people can find you online.
Thank you. Yes, my website is the same, Licia, Licia, Thompson.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Licia. I'll post an overview of everything that we talked about today. You provided a lot of great insight in terms of how to approach this very unprecedented, even more complicated return to work process in the world of COVID, and doing it from a very empathetic and compassionate point of view. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You are welcome anytime. And next week we'll have a guest who will be talking about